making stories personal. So bringing in, customer testimonials and that kind of thing is part of the messaging.
Welcome to the Entail AI podcast, where we go behind the scenes with top marketing leaders and innovators who are driving growth for their brands. Today we have James Ryan in the hot seat. Over the years, James has developed his skills in tech marketing and is currently focused on the fintech sphere. From head of growth to director of e-commerce, James has been involved in various startups and helped them get to their next level of success. Let's take a listen to his approach to cost-effective product marketing strategy and execution.
Hi, James. Nice to have you on board.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Okay, so before we start, do you want to take a moment and introduce yourself? Professionally, your experience and so on?
Sure. Yeah, so I started off my professional career as a journalist and wrote for various wire service. Initially, I was a foreign correspondent, and then kind of drifted into writing about tech, which has been an area that's fascinated me, and it's constantly changing and evolving. It was very exciting to cover as a journalist, but at some point, I decided it would be more fun to work for the type of company I'd been writing a lot about, which were tech startups. So I initially wrote a business plan to start my own company, but I ended up kind of getting hired into one of the very first mobile startups called AvantGo, which was way back in the Palm Pilot, Windows Mobile, BlackBerry days before the iPhone and Android phone kind of took over the market. And then I started my own company that was VC funded. I've started a couple of my own companies, but mostly have worked for early stage tech startups, primarily based in the US, but a lot with global footprints. And I kind of specialize in developing, the very early stage go-to-market plans for these companies and helping them with strategy and refining the product. A lot of engineers are great at kind of developing prototype products that really need to be refined to be customer friendly. So a lot of what I do is, yes, I have to acquire customers and figure out who those customers are. But as a member of a startup team, you're also typically very involved in refining the product and developing the product and making it more customer friendly. So it's kind of a combination of customer acquisition and really product development or product marketing, where you're figuring out, what's the best product market fit in terms of who your audience is, but also, how you evolve your product.
I have a bunch of questions, but before we jump into them, a few of the things that you mentioned are, I found them interesting. So one, what we do at Entail is very similar in a way, like you're saying. My experience is that most founders and most businesses are very product oriented, and often it's from the technical perspective of the product. Even if it's an e-commerce product, they're just obsessed with the product. And my previous company, most of the work that we did because of the product that we were selling and so on, it was about marketing. So we had a team of developers working maybe 5% of the time on the product and 95% of the time on marketing. And I thought that was my first company. I didn't know much. I thought that was just the regular situation. And then I figured out that most businesses don't do it. And that's why...
Yeah, usually it's almost the opposite.
Yeah.
And it's become better because I think people over the years have gotten engineers and other like founders have gotten a better understanding of the importance of marketing. But like at the beginning, like the first few startups I worked for, I really felt like I was trying to wrest control away from, the developers and into the hands of like the marketing and the sales team, because we were the ones that were interacting with the customer and also, as potential, usually, as a marketer, you need to have empathy for your customer and put yourself in the customer mindset and try to use the product as a customer would. And we would see these issues that the engineers, since they often have a different kind of mentality, that they thought, this works great, and we don't understand why we would need to change it. So it was a big kind of struggle back and forth to try to get more control over product development so we could create more user-friendly products. And that's such a critical aspect of tech products that isn't often the case with the real world products. Is you have to create an onboarding experience that's user-friendly and teaches the person how to use the product. And if you don't have that right, no matter how good the kind of the product is in the background, if you don't have a good, user interface or user experience right from the beginning, your product isn't going to be successful because people, and again, it's, younger people, Gen Z, millennials really expect a lot out of their products because there's so many good, simple products in the world that you just can intuitively understand. You don't, most products historically had these, very elaborate, instruction guides, right? Whether it was your car or some electronics products, you had to read like a 10-page guide to figure out how the thing worked. And today, most products don't come with any kind of like really good products, like, Google products and Apple products. They don't barely have an instruction guide because everything is so intuitive.
Even if they do, I mean, I can't read the instructions anymore. It's like, I'm not that young, but I don't have the patience anymore for that,
Yeah. So you need to have, like, in tech products, the bar is even higher, especially mobile apps. So a mobile app, basically, you either have to have a walkthrough that teaches a person about the product, or the product just needs to be so well designed, from the first minute they open it, that they can figure out, how it works and what to do with it. And if you don't have that nailed, people just don't have patience. They'll install your app and they'll spend 60 seconds on it, and if they can't figure out what it does and it doesn't do anything for them, then they're gone on to the next product.
Yeah, I agree. I'm like that too. So I'm very impatient with that stuff.
We all are like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we built Entail, because we realized that companies don't build marketing tech in-house. They just, all of their development. And I mean, I can tell you that the situation I see in most companies, for example, when it comes to their website, and even if you're talking about large tech companies that are well-funded, have a lot of customers, and like a big R&D team, their marketing team has almost zero dev resources, not to mention the SEO team. They have no dev resources. And if they do, I mean, the people who are in charge of the website are almost always either like a freelance developer or a dev company. It's not the R&D team. The R&D team has nothing to do with their website or with their marketing. So, and there's a complete like disconnect there, which is, I find, I mean, for me, marketing is always the first thing, and I find it very strange to look at it. I mean, having said that, I mean, we did build Entail without marketing in the beginning, and we're all like only now building marketing because we built it in a little bit of a different way. And another thing that you said, which is interesting to me, maybe on a kind of like a bit personal, or like because of our business, because you said you started as a journalist, and I know it's not like the topic that we're like planning to talk about, but you started as a journalist, and I mean, we're in content. And what I found today with all the changes with AI and so on, we find that just regular content writers are, I mean, they're not that necessary anymore, because they used to just summarize other articles and create content. So now I feel that content creators is basically down to either experts that can really like share their experience, or journalists that are expert content creators. I mean, and that's, I mean, and I have no experience with journalism, and I just, like what I'm trying to like think about for a while I think there's room for people with journalistic backgrounds in tech and in marketing, because of the quality of the content that's now required due to all the changes with AI. I mean, the changes in AI, I think they require now brands to create a much higher level of content, which you can't just create anymore with the regular content writer. You need somebody with much more experience. And I think those people with like real high quality content experience, like how to create like really very interesting, engaging articles, how to do the proper research and all that. I mean, I think the best people for that are in journalism. I know, I mean, you come from that, you started there. So I wonder, like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I think I've found that to be the case too, that I often hire, especially for the higher level content. So there's, I think especially with AI, there's just different levels of content that you're very conscious of. And sometimes you need volume quickly. So maybe you turn to AI, and I never use AI generated articles. Like I'm these days, I'm very heavily reliant on AI. Like everybody, I think, has to be, but really as more of a first draft. And as a journalist myself, a lot of the writing process was editing. So you do like a first draft, and then you maybe do 5 or 10 iterations of it to get the final product. You fine tune it. So that's kind of how I approach using AI. It'll spit out a first draft, but then I need to kind of customize it and personalize it, because AI, and it'll get better, but I find that what it generates is pretty kind of generic sounding. It does feel like it's impersonal, doesn't have any kind of like flair, and good writing. Good writers are able to bring personality to writing, and they can bring that, create a personality for your company based on how much humor you have, or how technical it is, or how good you are at explaining technical things. So yeah, no, I agree that if you need higher level content, journalists are good people to turn to, because they're used to churning or writing content that people want to read, right? So they're very conscious of how they wordsmith it. They're not trying to just get ideas out there. They're trying to get ideas out there that people are interested, in a form that people are interested to read.
Yeah, I think like another aspect of it is, I mean, there's a few aspects. I think, like I said, with AI now, because of the inflation in content, when there's inflation, you need to go towards value, not towards. So it's more towards quality in that case instead of quantity. And like you're saying, journalists they need to think about they need to think about the reader. People need to really read that content, and it has to, and they compete with a lot of other, usually like media outlets and so on. So their content needs to be really good, and on the other hand, I think, again, I never worked in journalism, but I think working in tech and marketing probably pays better than journalism. And I think because of that content quality situation now, I think there's more room for. I don't see that happening yet, because I know if many people think about that, but I think there's more room for journalists to move into marketing, because I think what tech companies need in terms of the quality of the content, then I see a lot of them struggle with that. Just think about the situation where a tech company, usually most of the knowledge, the executives have most of the interesting knowledge in the company. And a lot of the content you create has to rely on that knowledge. And the executives are not writers, they're not journalists, and they're super busy, and their time is expensive. And when they need to compete on users' attention, usually they compete on social media. And then on social media, they compete mostly with individuals now, not with other brands, because other brands have the same problem. Content creation is too expensive for them because the executives can't create content. And so what I think is, just because you mentioned you started in journalism, that like it came up for me, I think there's room for brands to use more people with journalistic background, because they know how to create content at a much better level than most marketers do.
And the other aspect of it is this idea of storytelling. And as a journalist, I always, and I've done creative writing too. I've written screenplays and short stories, but in general, I look at all of my writing as telling a story. And there's, and again, journalists, I think, are good at telling that story, telling, a company's story, or telling a story about a product. That's again, just a little bit more interesting for humans to engage with, because there's a storytelling aspect, and whether it's the founder's story, or I find kind of, making stories personal. So bringing in, customer testimonials and that kind of thing as part of the messaging and that's what you do as a good journalist, right? You don't just write about something, you interview people to get different human perspectives on the topic. And that's what people find really interesting about journalism, is you've got a bunch of different people who, sometimes they're experts or thought leaders, providing their take on the subject. But sometimes it's just regular people. And I think as humans, we're interested in that. With AI, you're not going to get that aspect, right? You're not going to get that kind of human input into the content because there's no human that they can reach out to, right?
I mean, there's no. I mean, that's why also Google calls it like they had like the EAT, like expertise, authority, and trust, and now they added another EEAT, so experience, expertise, authority, and trust, because like you say, people care about that unique story, that personal aspect to things, and what I see from a lot of brands, I mean, the marketing managers, they get a lot of push, I mean, a lot of pressure from the executives to lower down marketing costs, and they're looking more and more into AI for creating content. But again, if you're driving down costs, I mean, because the cost of marketing is not derived from how much it costs to create content. It's derived from the price of the product. Because if you're selling product for $100 and you can spend, I don't know, let's say up to $50 or up to $80 on acquisition, and you can drive down your marketing costs. I mean, I'm going to come in and I'm going to spend more on my marketing costs. If the margin is good enough, I'm going to create content that's better than yours, and that's how I'm going to win. So it's not about the cost of like being able to reduce the cost. It's about how can you increase the quality. And I think what brands are doing is they're going more and more towards the place of creating content with AI, where what I think they should be focused more on is what you just mentioned, more like storytelling. How do you, because if you compare content that brands create, think about B2B brands, okay? I mean, the content that they create is far from the level of content you see in journalism. Because eventually, if you do read an article, and I mean, not just SEO, you do want to read a good article, it has to have journalistic standards. Otherwise, you're not going to spend time on it. You know, maybe it's a how-to guide that you're going to skim through and read quickly to get something done. And, you know, that that created it may even convert you as a customer. But eventually, if you really want to read an article, and so in other words, if an article really has value, you'd read it on Forbes, Wall Street Journal, or one of those publishers that really have standards. And it's usually not on a B2B or another like brand's website when you do read an article. And that's why I think what brands need to be doing is shift more and more toward that type of content creation that's, like you say, relies more on storytelling and the personal aspects of it.
And then I have a question for you, because this is something I've been trying to figure out, because I know it's like a moving target, is whether or not AI generated content even has value in a search engine environment. I mean, because I haven't experienced it myself that I've, you know, I have a definitive answer, but I've read and heard that AI generated content, that Google can tell the difference. I know there are tools out there that can discern whether something's AI generated or not. Does Google ignore AI generated content within, you know, their SEO calculations?
In the beginning, the main conversation was about Google is going to be against AI generated content and so on, and they were, and we were also like very much against it. But Google pretty quickly, I mean, compared to a very large company, they move very quickly and they respond very quickly. And eventually, and you can think about it for yourself, because with Google, there's one constant thing. I mean, their algorithm changes 4,000 times a year. Okay. So there's small changes and big updates to the algorithm. But eventually there's one constant there. And the constant is they must provide you with the best results for your search. Otherwise, you're going to search somewhere else. So that's their value proposition. They can't deviate from it. And the question is then, what is the best results? And, you know, Google, you know, rely on thousands of different indicators to determine what is the best result. And there was a Google update about a year ago that's called the helpful content update. And I like it. And I often say that Google is a company that deals with keywords. I mean, their business is search and they need to deal with words or keywords. And so they're very accurate when they use words. And also when they name updates, they use very accurate words terms to name their updates. And they call this update the helpful content update. And just this term, helpful content, you know, it means a lot, because you can't put the finger on like there's no like recipe for what it means to create helpful content. But eventually you understand that the content really needs to provide value for the reader, really need to help them solve or find what they're looking for. And then if this is the main guideline, then if you can create content better than I can, and you use AI, I mean, the searcher doesn't care. They need to solve a problem. So it's not about what tools you use to create the content. It's really about the end product. Is it really helping the user? Another aspect of it is another update that Google made about 6 months ago. I think my memory isn't that good, so I'm not sure if it's really the time frame. But they had an update called perspectives, and again, just one word, one term explains what it means. So perspectives means, and they added another tab on their search that you can click and see perspectives, and it's mostly Google indexing videos from social media. Because what they can understand, and you can see that a lot in politics, in history, in many other fields, especially in today's world and today's politics, we can't even agree on the facts. Opinions, of course, nobody agrees, but we can't even agree on this fact. So and you can see it a lot on social media, where it's a lot about perspectives. It's a lot about opinions. What do you mean? And so this update that they had is really about, there's a question here about whether AI is good for search or not. So I can tell you my perspective, my opinion. Somebody else may have a completely different opinion, and you're interested in hearing those opinions. And so that's what they show, and so that's what they're aiming for. So what I've seen from them is that they can move away from the question whether you're using AI or not. They have tools, and there's also open source tools and free tools to determine whether content was created with AI or not. But I don't think they really care about this question anymore. For them, it's really about transparency. So, for example, it is important who created the content, because that also, if a journalist wrote the content, if a doctor wrote it, so that has to do with the trust that you create and the credibility of the content. But eventually, it's really a lot more about the content itself. Is it really helping me solve my problem? So, for example, I would not ask ChatGPT for a prescription. Okay, I wouldn't trust it with that, even though it may get some of the prescriptions right if I have a headache or if I don't feel well or something like that. On the other hand, if I need an Excel formula, I use it quite a lot for that, because usually I use Google Docs, Google Sheets. But when I ask ChatGPT for a Google Sheet formula, usually the formulas work, so I can trust it with that. Okay, so again, for me, and I think that's what Google stands behind now. It's less about how you create the content; it's more about the content itself and that it provides value. And that's why I mentioned as well that for most brands, again, another aspect of it, if you can ask ChatGPT for the answer, or Bard for that matter, okay. If AI can provide a very good answer to your question, then ask AI. So in that sense, if AI can provide a good answer to your question, to a certain query, then you don't need to create an article for it. For example, content about how to solve something on a spreadsheet, like how to write a formula, is less valuable now, because this is exactly the query type, or the query class, we call it at Entail. So exactly the type of search that people will do more and more using AI, But when it comes to opinions, perspectives, etc., personal experience, people want to know what other people think, If I was to visit California, I'd probably feel much better if you recommended a few places to visit, a few restaurants, a few sightseeing, whatever. Rather than AI telling me, because the personal experience and perspective, I think, plays a significant role there.
Scaling your content marketing and SEO efforts can be difficult. If you're looking for a partner to help you succeed, Entail AI has the right tools to help you achieve your marketing goals. Find out more at the link in our bio, or go to entail.ai to check out our range of solutions.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And a couple of things that you said just now help clarify a few things in my mind. The first thing that came up was at my last company, Blue Willow AI, which was a text to image generator. We got a lot of organic traction from influencers creating videos about our product. People were very excited about AI and image generation, and we just had a lot of people create these YouTube videos. And we did a lot of customer surveying early on and asking people how they found out about us. And 50% of them said it was from YouTube videos. And at first we thought, well, this would just be the first first month because some people, early adopters, created these videos, but it remained consistent for the first 6 months. It was always 50% of people discovering it from YouTube, which really surprised me because I didn't see it in our traffic analysis. So people weren't, say, clicking on these YouTube videos and going directly to our website. They were finding out about us and then probably typing in Blue Willow or directly. So it was kind of hidden traffic until we actually did user surveys. So it's just again, it kind of highlights the need to always be treating any kind of analytic, like single analytic source, with a grain of salt in trying to get deeper by talking to your customer directly. And then see, what was the second? Yeah. Anyway, so that's super important. And again, the more I kind of use analytics, which you need to in digital marketing, the more I sort of become very suspicious of any single source of analytics. So, especially as you scale, Google and Facebook, they have great built-in analytics tools, but they're there in part to help those companies make money and not really just serve your interests.
I think that's a big problem with analytics now, because, like you say, it is built to help companies make money, and basically the companies that need to make money are the basically the like Google, Facebook, the platforms themselves, but like where you can advertise, or the advertising platforms, so you can easily track Facebook traffic, Instagram traffic from an ad. Like a click on an ad goes to your website, you can track that. Same thing from Google. But again, you see today with the acquisition costs on the rise all the time, and with the attention moving more and more towards social media and organic content on social media rather than paid. Because if you're on TikTok and you see an ad, you scroll right through. If you're on YouTube on your laptop, you have an ad blocker. If it's on your phone, you just skip that. You don't want to watch the ad. You want to watch the content. And so those platforms, what they did is, when you're watching organic content, there's no link, basically. On YouTube, there is a link in the description. Nobody ever clicks it. On Instagram, there's like linking bio. Nobody ever clicks it. People do click it, but a very small number. Usually what happens, if you have good content, the result would be an increase in your branded searches, like the organic searches, because probably what happened in your previous company, what you just mentioned, is people see you on YouTube and they say, okay, this is an interesting product, I want to check it out. They go and they Google your product and they find you through there. So what you see is an increase in branded searches. They say, how is this happening? Where is this coming from? And you realize that people are talking about your product on YouTube. But the platforms themselves, they don't provide, if it's organic, if it's not paid, they don't provide a link to click out. It's called, like Rand Fishkin from Moz called it, coined the term zero-click content. Like on social media, there's no place to click besides the bio page. And that's like what you're saying about analytics is, it's very difficult for companies. It's almost impossible, or it is impossible, to really measure your social media traffic. You can just measure, traffic from Facebook, from Instagram, from TikTok. You can understand that's the traffic source, but you can't say which piece of content contributed to sales more than other piece of content. You can see, there's a piece of content that got more comments, more likes, more shares, etc. But you can't really attribute sales to a specific piece of content. You can also only say, this resulted in more engagement. And so that's a very big challenge for many companies now, because there isn't really a way to attribute sales to social media traffic properly.
Right. So that's definitely true for social media traffic. That's definitely true for other types of organic traffic. But, the dangerous thing is, you think for your paid traffic, at least, that these platforms are giving you accurate information about, say, your conversions, right? And you're basing all your optimization on the conversion numbers, because that, obviously in some campaigns you may have them set up to optimize for conversion. I tended to trust that. I mean, with a little grain of salt, like I figured it was 80% accurate. But it would point me in the right direction. And then when I was working at Brave, we unfortunately, because we were very privacy obsessed as a company, we weren't allowed to use any kind of internal tracking tools, or partner with any kind of tracking companies that we would have to, provide personal data to, which is almost any kind of tracking company you're having to allow that to happen. Anyway, so we were completely reliant upon, say, the tracking within Google Ads. Though we did track, say, the number of people installing our product, and at one point, Google AdWords was taking credit for 120% of our conversion. So, and we knew how many people were installing the app, and that they were installing them from different sources, friend referrals and other partners. But Google somehow was, and I spent a lot of time talking to people at Google about this, and they just had no good explanation for how their conversion, and it's an algorithm. That's the other thing, right? Google rarely tracks actual events. They use algorithms to give an estimate of conversions or clicks or whatever. And their algorithms can be pretty accurate. But in this case, it was an impossibility that, because 120% is it's a false number, right? Because you can only have 100%. And it was probably closer to maybe 70% because we were pretty heavily reliant upon Google Ads very early on there. But yeah, so it was very, very frustrating because I was trying to, there's no way to kind of triangulate the truth because we couldn't use a third party, internal tracking mechanism in that case. But in general, I like to do that. I like to, have internal tracking mechanisms completely independent of any Facebook platform or Google platform. I think that's really important, especially as you scale.
You mean to build your own analytics?
Yeah, and make sure that your analytics team is setting it up so that you can track it by campaign, and you'll have something closer. And it's probably not perfect, but it's going to be closer to the truth than anything these other companies that are trying to make money off of you are providing with you. And I think a lot of junior people in particular, they have a lot of faith in the numbers at these that these big companies provide you, but you just really have to treat those with a grain of salt.
I mean, I don't really like Google Analytics. I always try to avoid it. Usually, I like to use Mixpanel, but also across this, I know if that's your experience too. But when you compare, a few platforms like that, they're like the results, the numbers, they're very different between platforms. Did you experience that as well? Like you can see at least 30% different.
Yeah, they're very different. That's why it's important to have multiple sources. And there's going to probably be, again, something like a mixed panel or a mode where there should be limited bias there. Those should be closer to the truth, and you should rely on those more heavily. And then you have to kind of triangulate back, into the ad platforms in terms to optimize. So it's a little tricky because you have to do that in a spreadsheet or do that manually. But if you want to scale these things, your campaigns accurately, you really have to get a trusted source of truth on your conversions.
Mm-hmm. And so going back to what you mentioned about YouTube being a significant contributor to your marketing. So you're saying that this happened rather spontaneously from your community. Did you also do any other activities on social media? What can you tell in general about your experience with social media, different channels, and there's probably also differences between B2B, B2C. Yeah.
Starting with this YouTube instance at Blue Willow, once we discovered this fact, and it was. And again, I literally didn't trust it at first. I thought maybe our audience survey was skewed, but because it was Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what, but it just seemed too high of a number, because typically your audience comes from more varied sources, and typically nobody's providing you with 50% of your customers. But as I kept seeing that number pop up, and like we would survey people differently, then I started to believe it, and then we kind of doubled down on YouTube. So we proactively courted YouTube influencers. So anytime, so we developed a list of the influencers who had created videos about us, and then we would go back to them when we did a significant product release and said, hey, this problem that you mentioned in your first video, we've solved that with the new product release. So a lot of our marketing became influencer oriented, going back to these original YouTube creators, and then also trying to find other people who had written about competitor products or seemed to be covering the space, to invite them proactively to review our product. When we initially were free when we launched, so we could get a large customer base. But once we started offering, it went with a freemium model where we were giving limited access to our product for free, and then if you wanted full access, either to newer models or to more image generation, you would need to buy a subscription. We had coupon codes, and then we would offer both the influencers who'd written about us or done videos about us, free subscriptions to again entice them, and then we also went out to influencers on other platforms, TikTok and Twitter, X, to get offering those people, and again annual subscription at the high end was $200. So we would offer them, hey, here's a $200 subscription to test us out, or maybe it would be sort of we'll give you this subscription if you provide a link from your account over to us. So yeah, we because we were self-funded, so we had a little bit of money to launch the product, to do some paid acquisition. But after the first month, we decided we didn't want to spend any more. We couldn't really afford to spend any more money because we had our bandwidth costs were so high. So we relied exclusively on organic sources of traffic after the 1 month of paid acquisition. So again, you can't always do that with companies, but there are, especially in the consumer space, there's just a lot of ways to get the word out there about their product with social media and influencers. So we shifted, a lot of our acquisition, all of our acquisition, in that direction towards organic traffic. One thing that was super helpful was the fact that we were launched on Discord. So we had this very large Discord community. Discord also has, a discovery engine where you can search for communities within their kind of like an app search engine, which again you can. I don't think there's a term for it, but I applied. So there were strategies that I developed when I was to get discovery improved in the app stores. So it's search based. So critical thing for app stores is to include keywords in the title and the description. With Apple, that's like all you have, right? You have a handful of keywords you can put into their tool. You can use keywords in your name, and you can use keywords in like a short description, and that's all they use for their search algorithm. Android is different. Android uses a broader search algorithm. That's more based on Google search, but Apple's very limited. And I did some reverse engineering by looking at what other companies, how they were coming up in search results, and I realized that Discord was applying a very narrow use where the words were appearing in their search algorithm. So I expanded our name to include not just our brand name, but also a bunch of keywords after the name. And therefore, we were able to get a lot of extra discovery for free by just including keywords.
What kind of product can you promote on Discord?
Well, any product that you have a community around, right? So initially, Discord started off with a lot of there were more gamer communities, but we actually had our entire product on Discord. Like we had a website that drove traffic to Discord, but we didn't have a web-based or a mobile app that included our product. You had to be on Discord to use the product. So Midjourney, primarily launched on Discord, and I think, still 95% of their customers are on Discord. They do have a web app that not too many people use. Other companies like Leonardo are mostly on their web app, but they have communities as well. I mean, OpenAI has a big community on Discord. So it's really kind of a new source for acquiring customers, and not every product. Like I don't think it's very good for B2B products at this point, but I mean, definitely for video games, but a lot of other products that have an overlap with that kind of audience, Discord can be a pretty useful marketing method, and also a great way to understand your customer better, because you can do surveys of those customers and get feedback from your customers about your product. So a lot of your customer support, can happen on Discord. It's a really interesting kind of social tool, which is more about content than it is content and branding, and less about community. Like, there's some community aspects, engaging with your audience on X, and obviously on Facebook. It's just kind of more powerful, because Discord was designed as a community platform and not as like a messaging platform.
Yeah. But the audience there, the people on Discord are usually younger generation, seems to me like kind of like tech savvy, or even like kind of gamers even. Am I correct? Is it the type of audience you can find on Discord?
Yeah. So that raises another really interesting issue, and has resulted in some kind of counterintuitive discoveries for me with any social media platform. So social media platforms, by their very nature, are very large, right? You've got, billions of people on Facebook, hundreds of millions of people on X. I don't know how big Snapchat or TikTok are these days. And the general impression is that, each of these platforms kind of has a demographic. So Facebook now is skewing older because it's been around more. TikTok, the sense is it's a bunch of kids on TikTok. Snapchat, when it first came out, again, it was really supposedly like a lot of Gen Z kind of younger people gravitating towards it. But because they're so large, you actually have the full spectrum of your audience there. Just maybe not in such large numbers as you might find them on, say, Facebook or Google. But you can't really ignore these platforms as a way to find your audience, because they're so large, they're going to be there whether they're 50 years old or 15 years old. And there was one company I worked for that we were very successful, for example, in finding young mothers on Snapchat. And it wasn't supposed to be, moms were not supposed to necessarily be on Snapchat. It was supposed to be like a younger, like teen or early 20s audience. But, it was popular enough with enough moms, and maybe people hadn't discovered this yet. So it was actually fairly easy to cost effectively find like young moms on Snapchat. And that's might not have been the first place, for you to look. So with these big platforms, again, they have kind of a core audience that kind of has a reputation for being one thing, but in reality, you can generally use those to find anybody. And that's the case with Discord. So yes, it's designed for gamers. The thing about gamers is, I think people have misconceptions about who gamers are. And these days, gamers are everybody, particularly mobile games. And people think they're just a bunch of junior high school kids, playing some of these games, which is true for certain types of games. But the broader game audience is very reflective of, the web audience, which is, kind of everybody. Maybe not the oldest people, but it's our audience for Blue Willow was mirrored, even though it was purely on Discord, mirrored very closely the general web audience, which, the median tends to be like 35 to 40, not, 15 to 25, as you might expect. So yeah, you just can't make assumptions, often about these things.
Thank you for listening to the Entail AI podcast. Join us next time for another masterclass when we sit down with a marketing luminary to reveal their path to success.